All right, welcome everyone to the deep dive. We get it, you're busy, you want the key insights without wading through a sea of information. So today we're focusing on a real learning moment in pharmaceuticals, and that is a major GMP failure.
You got it. We're going to break down a whole case study, a real GMP breakdown. The idea isn't to point fingers, but to really understand what happened, how the regulations kicked in, and most importantly, what everyone learned. These situations, while serious, actually push the industry forward. They show why thinking ahead about quality is so crucial.
And to help us get there, we've pulled in all sorts of stuff, the official code of federal regulations, think of it like the industry rule book, right? We've got practical guidelines and even some real-world examples of what the FDA looks for during inspections. So first things first, why is GMP so important in making medicines?
Well, GMP, you can find it in regulations like 21 CFR Part 211, is all about making sure the medicines we use are top-notch. The goal is pretty straightforward: prevent contamination, stop mix-ups, and basically guarantee that every single drug is safe and effective consistently for every patient. It's about baking quality into every stage of a medicine's life.
Yeah, it's not just a final check. It's about designing quality in from the very beginning. It's interesting, even the way a manufacturing facility is laid out, like Terry Jacobs and Andrew Signor talk about in their book, is a big first step in preventing contamination and errors.
That's right. Everything matters. How materials move, where people go, even the air systems have to be carefully designed. You need separate zones for different activities to minimize any chance of cross-contamination or goofs. Now, when those safeguards don't work or something in the process goes wrong, that's what we call a GMP failure. To show you how this works, we'll dig into a case study. We won't name names here. It's more about the lessons.
Okay, so paint us a picture here. What kind of GMP failure are we talking about? Something like contamination, a labeling error, or maybe equipment malfunctioning?
Let's say it's contamination. Imagine a batch of medicine gets contaminated with microorganisms. Maybe there were problems with the cleaning and sanitization procedures. That's where regulations like 21 CFR Part 110 come in, talking about non-food contact surfaces and equipment, and 21 CFR Part 111 also touches on that, making sure facilities are designed to be cleaned properly.
So, how do those cleaning and sanitization procedures go wrong? Is it just people not following checklists, or are there deeper problems?
Usually it's a mix of things. Maybe the written procedures themselves, which are a GMP must-have, weren't detailed enough, leaving room for different interpretations or mistakes. Or even with good procedures, maybe people weren't consistent in how they followed them. It could also be that the facility's design made it hard to really clean certain areas. The best quality systems have strong procedures. A&D makes sure trained people are following them consistently.
Got it. So, things are set up for contamination to happen. What next? How does a company typically realize that there's been a failure?
Well, a good quality control system would catch it during routine testing. Regulations like 21 CFR 211.165 are all about that, saying testing is crucial, and materials can only be released if they meet the set quality standards. So they test samples from the batch and hopefully find the contaminant there.
That's their internal safety net, catching it before it reaches patients. But what if something still slips through despite those measures?
If it's not caught internally, it might pop up through a customer complaint, which shows how important those complaint handling processes are. We've talked about those before. Or the worst case scenario, it could be discovered during an FDA inspection. We've seen those discussed a lot.
Yeah, those FDA inspections are like a double check on the system. So once a failure is found, what does a company have to do right away?
First, they usually stop production to prevent more potentially affected product from being made. The suspect batches are quarantined. 21 CFR 211.84 lays out those rules. And then a full internal investigation kicks off to figure out the root cause of the problem, just like 21 CFR 211.192 says, which requires a deep dive into any discrepancies.
Sounds like all hands on deck to contain the issue and understand where it came from. Now, the regulatory agencies like the FDA would probably get involved at some point, right? What does that usually look like?
Definitely. Depending on how serious and widespread the GMP failure is, the FDA would probably do an inspection. When we look at past FDA Form 483 observations, some things keep popping up. Problems with the quality control unit's responsibilities, how thoroughly discrepancies are investigated, whether the written procedures are good enough, laboratory controls, and equipment maintenance, all these come up a lot. So if our contamination case showed any of these weaknesses, the FDA would likely note them.
And when the FDA records these findings, what form do they usually take? We hear about Form 483s and warning letters. What's the difference?
So a Form FDA 483 is given at the end of an inspection and lists what the investigator observed, things that might deviate from GMP regulations, but not necessarily official violations yet. That's from the CITC 2024 Day 3 transcript. It's like a to-do list from the FDA for the company. Now, a warning letter that same transcript talks about is a much bigger deal. It means the FDA thinks the non-compliance is serious and needs to be fixed ASAP. In really bad cases, the FDA can even start disqualification proceedings for individuals or facilities. They mention that in the transcript too.
A warning letter is definitely a red flag. And these findings, whether it's a 483 or a warning letter, they're all about how this impacts the quality and safety of drugs for patients, right? That's the core issue.
Exactly. During those inspections, the FDA's main job, as they say in the CITC 2024 Day 3 transcript, is to make sure the data is reliable and to protect patients. Any GMP failure that could put those things at risk is taken seriously.
Okay, so the findings are in. Now it's time to figure out why the failure happened in the first place. What goes into analyzing the root cause of something like our contamination example?
It takes a really thorough investigation. They need to go deep to find the fundamental reasons behind the contamination. Looking at our resources, inadequate training is a common one. GMP regulations like 21 CFR 111.315 and stuff we talked about in our Season 2 transcript say it's crucial to have qualified people with the right education, training, and experience to do their jobs right.
Oh.
So, for example, if the folks doing the cleaning and sanitizing weren't fully trained on the procedures, that could be a root cause.
Makes sense. You can have perfect procedures, but if the people doing them aren't trained properly, it all falls apart. What other root causes might an investigation find?
Documentation problems are another big one. That whole idea of if it isn't documented, it didn't happen is everywhere in the EAS Consulting Group video, in Roger E. Ojhaus' video on good documentation practices, or GDP. So in our contamination scenario, maybe the cleaning records weren't filled out accurately or there's no clear record of who did what and when. Regulations like 21 CFR 211.188 for batch production records and 21 CFR 211.194 for lab testing records show how important detailed, accurate, and up-to-date documentation is. The CHIOS Lunch and Learn transcript and the FDA CITC Day 3 transcript talk about that too.
So, messy or incomplete records make it almost impossible to track back what went wrong. What about the equipment they use? Could that cause a problem?
Absolutely. If equipment malfunctions or isn't properly qualified or calibrated, that can be a big factor. The EAS Consulting Group video transcript and our Season 2 transcript both mention design qualification, DQ, installation qualification, IQ, operational qualification, OQ, and performance qualification, PQ. All of these are about making sure equipment does what it's supposed to, reliably. So maybe in our contamination case, the sanitizing equipment wasn't maintained or calibrated regularly, which made it less effective. Keeping good logbooks for calibration and maintenance is super important for showing everything's working right. Think of DQ as making sure the design minimizes risks. IQ is checking the installation, OQ means it operates as intended, and PQ shows it works consistently in daily use.
It's a lot to keep track of. What if the problem wasn't how people followed the procedures, but the procedures themselves?
Yeah, that's possible too. Weak procedures are definitely something to look at. GMP requires written procedures for all the critical operations, from manufacturing, laid out in 21 CFR 110.20b and 211.10, to packaging and labeling, covered in 21 CFR 211.130, and even lab testing, which is in the EAS Consulting Group video transcript. So in our case, maybe the SOP for cleaning wasn't good enough, maybe didn't have enough detail about important things like how long the sanitizing agent needs to be in contact or the right cleaning sequence. It's also crucial to review and update SOPs to keep up with best practices.
And lastly, what about the facility itself? Could that be a contributing factor to a GMP failure like the one we're discussing?
For sure. Facility design and maintenance matter a lot. Terry Jacobs and Andrew Snory were big on that, saying you need enough space and a logical flow of materials and people to prevent contamination. Regulation 21 CFR 111.310 covers those requirements too. So in our scenario, maybe there wasn't enough ventilation somewhere, leading to a buildup of microorganisms, or some areas were just hard to reach and clean properly because of layout.
It's like a whole web of potential problems. So after the company figures out those root causes, what's next? It can't just be about admitting a mistake and moving on.
Nope,
Right?
not at all. That's where corrective and preventive actions, or KP, come in. Our Season 8 book on KP goes into this, saying a company has to take steps not just to fix the immediate problem, but to make sure it doesn't happen again. Good KP is more than just putting a Band-Aid on things. It's about reviewing the whole system, often needing different departments to work together. It's about moving from a reactive to a proactive approach to quality.
So what kinds of corrective actions might they take in our contamination example?
If the problem was training, they need better training programs focused on those cleaning and sanitization procedures for all the relevant staff, and they'd need to keep good records to show everyone's competent. If the written procedures were the issue, they'd have to revise and improve those SOPs, making them clear, complete, and reviewed regularly. For equipment problems, they need to step up their qualification and calibration programs with more frequent checks and detailed logs.
Makes sense. Directly tackling the weaknesses they found. What about those facility issues?
For the facility, they might actually have to change things, improve the ventilation, redesign areas to make them easier to clean, or even implement stronger cleaning and sanitization protocols for the whole facility. And if the problem was documentation, they'd need to reinforce those GDP principles, really hammering home how important it is to have accurate, complete, and timely records. More and more companies are also using risk management, like ICH-Q9 talks about, to try and find and address potential quality risks before they become failures. It's all about being proactive.
So even though a GMP failure is a bad thing, it can actually lead to positive changes within a company.
That's right. Learning from these case studies is crucial for improving a company's overall quality systems. It helps build a culture where people are thinking ahead and being proactive about quality. And it's not just about one company either. When GMP failures happen, the regulatory scrutiny and how the industry analyzes them, all of that adds to a collective learning process. Reports on trends in FDA observations, for example, help highlight vulnerabilities across the whole industry, which then informs best practices and shows companies where they need to invest in quality and risk management.
So in a way, these events, while concerning, ultimately help make the entire pharmaceutical industry safer and more reliable.
Exactly. Robust GMP isn't just about checking boxes for the regulators. It's the foundation for making sure medicines are safe and effective. When GMP fails, the potential consequences really highlight how important that regulatory oversight is. By carefully analyzing those failures and putting the right corrective actions in place, both individual companies and the whole pharmaceutical industry can keep learning and improving.
This has been a really insightful look into how complex pharmaceutical manufacturing is. It's a bit sobering, but when you think about all the different processes and how everything's interconnected, it makes you wonder, what are the ongoing challenges in maintaining high quality and preventing future failures in such a huge global industry? It seems like a constant struggle to balance innovation, efficiency, and quality.
You've hit on a crucial point. The constant push for new drug development, global supply chains, and increasingly complex drug formulations, all of that makes it tough to keep quality consistent. It takes constant vigilance, a commitment to learning from both good and bad experiences, and a truly embedded, proactive approach to quality management at every level of the industry.
Well, thank you for explaining this so clearly. I have a much better understanding now of GMP failures and the important lessons they teach us. And to you, our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you have a clearer understanding of GMP failures and what we can learn from them. Until next time, keep learning.